Hello, and welcome back to The Art of the Spiel, a podcast covering the 24th season of PatORG, The Art of the Steal. I'm Sarah from season 22, and with me today, in lieu of my usual co host Nico, I have two special guests. First, from season 21, please welcome back Steven. Steven, how's it going?
Hello, hello. Glad to be back to recap the craziness that is this season. Honestly, it's very entertaining, but it's so hard to follow sometimes. So I'm excited to dive in with you guys about everything that's been going on.
Yeah, so like Steven said, we have a lot to catch up on. We have a few episodes to get through today. So we had to bring on another special guest with us. And for the first time on the podcast, it is the funniest cast member from season 23. It's fifth placer Joe. Welcome in, Joe. How have you been enjoying being a spectator so far this season?
First off, I'm really glad that you mentioned the funniest award because if you didn't, I was going to. But it's been pretty interesting so far. I was thinking a couple days ago about how I would view the way I played as a spectator, just like how I would react to it. And it's suffice it to say, it's not what's happening in this season. I think my season and this season are taking two very different trajectories. But I'm not going to say it's not entertaining because it absolutely is. So I'm excited to get down and dirty and talk some details with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both seasons were entertaining. Camp Padorg was definitely entertaining, and this has been a really interesting pre-merge so far, I would say, in the Art of the Steal, and we have a lot to get through, like you guys said. So right now we're coming off of three back-to-back vote outs for the Louvre tribe, starting with Conrad. So Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about how we got into that vote? Because I know there are some things that maybe Conrad said to certain other people on his tribe that might have led to him becoming a target. So, what are your thoughts about the Conrad vote out?
Yeah, so I will say, first off, Conrad was generally pretty blunt and terse with how he interacted with people. Um, and that's not really something that people want to see in like a fellow survivor competitor, I would say, just because that could very easily be perceived as like someone trying to take control and I guess not really letting anyone else have a say. There was right when they lost that challenge, I forget which challenge it was exactly, but um, right when they found out that they had lost the challenge, Conrad had said, "As I already said," that was his exact quote. "As I already said, the plan is Nick." Um, and Nick was the obvious target based on how he had been rubbing everyone the wrong way as the game had initially started. But um, it's interesting to see how players took Conrad's sort of terseness and turned it against him.
Yeah, exactly. And another comment he had made earlier on is when he set up this alliance that they wanted to bring Brian into, or he specifically wanted to bring Brian into, and he sort of framed it as, "Will you be the sixth in this alliance?" And Brian, who's a veteran, immediately saw that as, okay, so I'm on the bottom of this alliance. So we see him wanting to target Conrad because of that as well. So, Stephen, what were your thoughts about how he handled these kind of like various situations where, as Joe said, he was very blunt with some of his words, and do you think that contributed to why he became a target here?
One of the hardest things about orgs is how you come across over text, right? Because it's one thing when you are able to talk with someone and have a conversation, whether that's face to face and you can see kind of their body language, or just over the phone and you can hear the inflection in their voice, which we saw a lot of that last season where people were using VCs like nobody's business. But the fact that and he kind of mentioned it later on that he is kind of just a blunt person and he doesn't mean it in a rude or maybe condescending way. That's just kind of how he is. But ultimately, you need to be aware of how you are perceived by others, right? We kind of see that in season 42 where Mike, I guess spoilers for season 42 if no one's watched it yet, um, where Mike at Final Tribal Council could not own up to how others perceived him. And they gave him multiple opportunities to, and he couldn't do it. And so Conrad kind of coming across as just like, yep, this is it. This is done deal. This is how we're doing it, because they had discussed voting Mick out previously. So it's not like it wasn't just a random plan that he had thought up and said, we're going to do this no matter what. That was already in the works, but it was just the delivery wasn't great. And his discussions with Brian weren't great either. And we kind of see that in Brian's parchment for Conrad, where he puts sounds good multiple times on the parchment as a way to kind of jab at Conrad for how, I guess, their communication was, because Brian would say something, very trivial or whatever. And Conrad would just reply with, sounds good. And when you just leave it at that and kind of just, it kills the conversation so quickly. And so when he comes to Brian and proposes this alliance, but says you're the sixth, instead of saying, we need a 6-person alliance to kind of control the vote. Would you be willing to join these other people that I have collected or that I've talked to that kind of are in agreement? Any way to present it in a way so that Brian feels comfortable, it would have gone over so much better. But just when you tell someone that you're number 6 in a 6-person alliance, it never looks good. I'm sorry, it just never does.
Yeah, even if it's not what you initially mean. Uh, when you the way that you text other people in orgs is, I mean, it's the main way that people can understand your personality. So it's important to make sure that you're not making any miscommunications.
Yeah, and it's not something we do like every day. Like a lot of people don't have experience texting strangers all day, like trying to get them to trust you when you don't know them in real life. So it's a delicate art, I think, to learn how to do that effectively. And I think to his credit, since he's been voted out, Conrad has talked about in Spec Lounge how he kind of sees the error of his ways and how things could have been misconstrued or not interpreted the way he meant them to be. So that's good to see if he decides to play another org. Another thing we have kind of coming up is Jessie wins an auction item that will allow her to mutiny if she chooses to, and she does consider it. So, what did you guys think about this item? Like, is this something you guys would have ever considered using in your seasons? What are the benefits and drawbacks of using it, and should she have used it?
Um, Personally, I would say if I were to have this um advantage, I guess you could call it, I don't know if I would have used it because I mean, I think on my season personally, a lot of the day one alliances are what mattered the most because the campfire twist allowed everyone to sort of stay in touch with their old allies, and so these were the people that you had the most working relationship with, and to sort of betray that by swapping over to another tribe, um, probably would not be seen as a beneficial move to one's individual game. Um, and we also saw that when Leona took greed without consulting her alliance members, that she was voted out immediately after. But I do think, given the right um, tribal dynamics, you could see a really unique circumstance where you swap over to maybe a super dysfunctional tribe, and then you're able to maybe not maybe not get voted out right away, maybe gather some allies and make some moves happen. But since Jesse was spoilers, since she was voted out right after Conrad, it's hard to say with any sort of concrete proof.
Yeah. And something also, just to backtrack a little, we had an interesting dynamic come into play before she was given the auction item, there was a tie in the bidding, and so she actually sort of had this anonymous conversation back and forth with Chase from Guggenheim. And Chase sort of said early on, okay, I don't think I need this item, but they talked about potentially working with each other in the future and talked about their tribe dynamics and that sort of thing. So, Stephen, what did you make of that conversation and anything that could have potentially come from it had they had the chance to reunite at some point?
I think what was hard about that, I mean, I guess they established pretty quickly that they were on opposite tribes. Somehow they were able to. Um, so I think if Jesse did play it, I think she would have been okay because, and we might talk about a little bit more later, but Guggenheim's dynamics were shifting constantly for a bit until they've kind of settled where they're at currently. And I think if she had mutinied, she burns a couple bridges in Tom. Um, Tom, I think more specifically, possibly Andy, but Tom was really close with Jesse, um, and so I don't know if he would have taken kindly to that, but she would have maybe reconnected with Chase, and then I think Chase would have pulled her in to further give them more numbers on that tribe because at the moment there's 9 of them and it's kind of a 4-4 split with Katie smack dab in the middle. And so I think if she had mutinied, I think she would have been a potential extra swing vote. I don't think she would have been voted out unanimously by Guggenheim.
Mm-hmm. And for the second vote in a row here, we see like the decoy being set up as a Nick versus Talia again. So, what do you guys think is contributing to this sort of being the default, and why hasn't it come to fruition at this point? Because spoiler, it happens at the next vote as well that is like the story that people are being told. So, how does that play into things, and like, why do you think they've been able to survive all these votes here?
I think part of it is because people are, like I said before, rubbed by Nick the wrong way. And actually, before we get into this, I just quickly wanted to mention this little footnote. When Conrad was voted out, Nick had a bit of an outburst at Tribal and sort of claimed the move for himself, um, which not what I would have done. But for me, it's sort of solidified that he needs to turn it around fast, um, because he's either on track to flame out post swap or just get dragged to the end as sort of a goat. But that's for another guest to manage when we get to that point. But anyway, um, part of part of why Nick and Talia have been sort of the perennial targets is because they're tightly aligned. And again, this is all my opinion. They're tightly aligned, and also no one really sees them as having any power. So they're just two easy vote offs.
The ironic thing about that though is they are 2 votes that people can use if need be, which we've seen multiple times. And so they do have a lot of power in that regard. What I find interesting about Nick is he's been playing kind of aggressively, but he just it almost feels like he doesn't think before he speaks. And so, like you were mentioning with the Conrad vote out, where he kind of has this little outburst and says, "Get off my island." It was weird, and it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, especially the ones that protected Nick, that wanted to work with Nick in some way and protected him, because it was, if anything, it was kind of a group effort to get Conrad out, spearheaded by Brian. Um, so I think that the reasoning why there has been this 3 votes in a row with the kind of meta target on Nick and Talia, I can't pin it on anyone in particular because up through episode 5, there's only 2 people that have correctly voted every tribal council, and that's Andy and Talia. And I don't think this is because of how Andy's playing. But I see this as being very similar to how Tony ran the post merge in Cagayan, where he kept Cass, he kept Tasha, and he kept Spencer for a lot longer than anyone wanted to be able to get out people that he deemed as threats later on or that were not useful to him. So instead of like one person spearheading it, it's almost kind of like the whole tribe is kind of acting like Tony in that regard. It's kind of weird, but that's how I see it. I feel that people are postponing any Nick or Talia vote so that they can target bigger targets now before they get to the merge, and then that person just wreaks havoc.
The ebb and flow of Survivor, man.
Yeah, it is definitely like a legitimate strategy, but they've really slipped through the cracks here, and we end up with a really interesting vote coming up after Jesse leaves. But before we get to that, I do want to give like a quick update on Guggenheim that we can talk through a little bit. Not much happening over there since they don't go to tribal here for a long time. But notably, we do see Chris completing the idol hunt. He has a hidden immunity idol, not for very long, before he does a couple of questionable things. First, he tells Cody about the idol. Um, and then in a weird, bizarre turn of events that was just like wild to watch live, we see him choose to sell his idol to DeLuca for the price of $20. And the way he justifies it is kind of like, okay, we think a swap is coming soon. DeLuca has a better social game than me. She'll be better served to have it, and she's going to give it back to me at the merge, which she does confirm she would agree to and give it back to him, and she's touched by the gesture since they're such close allies, etc. But this is very questionable gameplay. What do you think about all of this, Joe?
I just really quickly wanted to mention that I am recruiting people to the cult of deep value. Um, that is the term
Oh
that
no.
Chris used. That is the term that Chris used when he described his interactions with DeLuca as he was giving her the idol. He said, "You see this? This right here is deep." I don't know if we can swear, but deep bleeping value. And that was the funniest thing to me since the season started. Honest to God, I thought that that was so funny, and I still think it's hilarious. Um, even if like personally, I never found an idol my season. I didn't even want to try to find an idol because I knew it was going to be a massive waste of time. Because I would just be like bumbling. But I would not put myself because I think Nelson took like 15 hours to find his, and I would not subjugate myself to 15 hours of mental anguish trying to find this idol and then sell it to someone for $20 and then be thankful because I didn't just give it away to them for free. Um, but I'm not gonna lie, it was legendary. I love the fact that it happened. I love this cast.
It's so good. And do we know, does Cody know about this transaction, or does he think Crystal has the idol? Do we know?
I
I
don't.
don't think so.
It's
Mm-mm.
just like, why
Yeah.
would you do that and then do the other thing? It's just like so many things happening here. Yeah, and like okay, and then the other thing I guess of note on Guggenheim is that like the counter alliances come together after Danny got the screenshots of the alliances as were going on the other side. They're aware of like the K cubed alliance, etc. So he kind of brings together Chase and Amoya and Gabriel, and they bring in Katie as a swing vote. And for a while, we're unsure if Katie is going to be more loyal to this group or Cody and Chris. But then she seems to imply in her confessionals that she would side with the counter alliance if they had gone to a vote. And the vote would likely have come down to either DeLuca or Joey, which is really interesting given the idol placement there. So I'm not sure what would have happened with that, but I kind of would have loved to see that play out. But as it stands, we have this crazy idol transaction and sort of the promise of a counter alliance blindside, but it does not come to fruition.
It's so sad that it doesn't because I feel like it would have given us so much. And DeLuca in the I think a few hours leading up to the results for one of the tribal councils, after she got the idol, um, she is paranoid as she's just like in herself, like, should I play the idol? I feel like I'm gonna go home. And she's got right read. She's very correct. I think she is self-aware, that people like her and see that likability as a threat. And so I feel like had they gone to tribal council, she would have played the idol. Um, I don't know why Chris would sell her the idol when he admitted, like you said earlier, that he that her social game is better. If her social game is better, then she should be able to protect herself just through merit of the social game. So I would keep the idol for myself, so that way I know that I'm at least safe in that regard too. So a lot of missed opportunities here with them not going to tribal council, but I think it just gives us more fuel for later tribals to come.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true, Steven. And sorry, Joe, to cut you off. I just
No, yeah, go for it.
um yeah, it's interesting. I did want to ask you though, Joe, because like DeLuca, like you said, Steven, she's definitely been a little paranoid, but she's also self-aware, especially about her social game and how she's perceived. And I think the comparison I think of to last season would be Joffrey and or Jeffrey. I'm sorry, I always mispronounce. And all of
Absolutely.
his like
Yes.
his yeah. And so do you see that, Joe? And I kind of think of Lindsay from season 22 as well. But do you see that comparison? And if so, like in what way?
100,000% yes. I don't think Jeffrey ever left my number one, like my number one in my trust rankings. Um, because okay, I wouldn't say DeLuca's uh game is as good as Jeffrey's just because she's extremely paranoid. And Jeffrey was not ever paranoid. Um, but and also, he was at the top of everybody's trust rankings. He only left my number one at one point because he just blatantly told me, like, yeah, I have an alliance with Andrew and Jimmy. And I was like, okay, cool. um, but yeah, the comparisons are absolutely there. One thing that I did, if we could like jump forward just for a moment, earlier today even, Danny was speaking with DeLuca about I forget exactly what they were talking about, but they had like a really heartfelt conversation. And Danny even admitted, like, damn, I'm kind of rooting for her. And they're supposed to be on opposite sides of this whole alliance thing. So, like, I think she has room to work, and I think she could definitely, like, at least, make the jury phase. She's like, the path is pretty easily laid out in front of her because everyone likes her. She's just so, like, I guess, magnetic in the same way that Jeffrey was.
Yeah, and I think that comes through. She does a lot of VidCons as well, and she just seems so genuine and like honest in how she talks. So I can definitely see the appeal there and why people are drawn to her. Um, is there anything else we want to talk about on Guggenheim here, sort of pre-swap before we get into the final pre-swap vote over on Louvre?
I think there is there are a couple like feuds that are bubbling under the surface. Um, Chase does not like Chris at all. I believe it's Chris. I'm pretty sure it's Chris. If it's not Chris, it's Cody, but he does not like Chris. And I'm not sure exactly why that is. I don't remember if he gave any concrete indication of that, but Chase just is not a fan of him and kind of wants him out, um, which is really interesting. I think Chris on that tribe, we have DeLuca, who is playing a very good social game, but is paranoid, and Chris is just overplaying like crazy. And I think part of it is he just takes too much of a command in challenges as well, and that can always rub people the wrong way. And so I think them as a combo is very potent for people to want to flip on them, because you have a very social person with a very commanding person, and they kind of just morph into something that's not very desirable. Um, Amoya is kind of absent a lot of the time. Katie seems a little bit absent too. So like the big power players on Guggenheim are definitely Katie, or I'm sorry, not Katie, Chris, DeLuca, and I think Chase and Gabriel. Gabriel also has been having a really big budding relationship with Chase. And I don't know if anyone has clocked that yet. They both talk highly of each other in their confessionals and are very, very keen on protecting and helping each other. And so we see a couple pairs forming in Guggenheim, but because they haven't been able to test their relationships yet, it's hard to say if any of these any of these relationships would stand the test of time, basically.
Yeah, and I think the Chase thing in particular, like there's some like lingering like residual like distrust there because he was like kind of caught in like a weird lie back in like the first vote, if anyone remembers that. And I think that it's kind of a mutual thing with Chris, honestly, like you said, Steven. I don't think there's that much trust there. So that might come into play later on, especially where the swap ends up. So, yeah, okay. So the final vote we have here before the swap is really interesting. We see the kind of like pieces come together that lead to a big blindside and Idol goes out of the game. So where do you guys see this starting? Like who is initiating this final vote here?
I say it was sort of the brainchild of Andy, Justin, and Tom because they're the ones who I didn't exactly read back what they said the whole thing of it, but their alliance chat was basically popping the whole day or two leading up to um, Brian's vote out, and they were sort of debating who could get in on this plan of theirs, and eventually, in a strange turn of events, they managed to loop in Talia and convince her that she was the ringleader of it. I'm not really sure how they managed to do that, but what was even stranger is that she left her number one in Nick out of the vote. He was the only person to vote for Hunter. Um, so yeah, a lot of layers at work here, especially a lot of it was fueled by idol paranoia. Many people thought that either Brian or Hunter had the idol, which, you know, hindsight is 2020. It's true. Brian did have the idol. So that's justified on their part. But yeah, like I said, a lot of layers at work. I don't know how many we can peel back. It's like an onion.
It really is. Yeah. And I think part of it was Brian started to get clocked as being someone who had a lot of information and was kind of playing the middle here. Would you say that like this his social standing in the tribe was a big contributor here, Steven, to why he became a target for this sort of small alliance?
Oh, absolutely. I think this vote, and I'm really sorry, Brian, but this vote for me, it's going to be hard to top as best play of the season because of kind of like what Joe said. There's so many layers to it, and it worked out so wonderfully. And to watch it kind of unfold live was really, really good. There was a lot of different moving parts. A lot of people had to play their role correctly. There were a couple fumbles and missteps along the way, but ultimately it paid out in the end. Um, Brian was absolutely in the middle. I think Tom was one of the first to clock that. And Tom had a really interesting relationship with Brian. There's been some discussion of whether there may have been some metagaming involved because Tom did know of Brian from Spec Lounge last season and knew that Brian had played. I don't know if he knew the extent of how many orgs or how well Brian has placed in the past. Um, but we see this often. It happened on my season. And I think it's going to just happen always. Whenever newbies see someone that's new or someone that's played before, a veteran, they get paranoid because it's like, oh, they know what they're doing. They've done this before. They know the ropes. They know how to find idols. They know all these things. And so they kind of get in their heads about it. And they're very, very right about Brian because Brian is a very, very savvy player. Um, he just he was clocked pretty early on as being in the middle, and I think Tom was the first to have reservations about Brian, and because Tom was left out of the Jesse vote, and Jesse was his number one um, companion or alliance member, he really wanted to make a move and needed to form allies. And so he kind of, I think, planted the seeds in Andy and in Justin, who was also a target in the first episode, right? So he's kind of picking up people that may be on the bottom of whatever that 6-person alliance was that Conrad made. I feel like I'm gonna be a little bit long winded, but I have to talk about how um, this vote happened because it's very, very interesting. So Tom, Justin, and Andy get together and talk about the idol, Brian having it, he's in the middle, all these things, and they discuss who they want to bring in for a fourth. Because at the moment the tribe is split 4-4, or it's 8 people, and they don't want to tie and go to rocks or anything. So they think Hunter is tied in closely with Brian, which is true. They're unsure about Floyd, but Floyd also seems to be close to Brian, and Nick as well seems to be close with Brian, and Brian had expressed interest in working with Nick. So their only option really was Talia, and Talia was desperate. She hated being put up for the vote time after time. She wanted to make a move, and the key thing here was making Talia think it was her move and not letting her know that there were 3 people on the outside that had already planned this. I believe it kind of sparked interest in Talia or getting Talia roped in because Andy received a message from her where she mentioned voting Brian, but then edited the message to say Hunter. And so Andy thought that was interesting that there would be that slip up. So he called her out on it, brought up the idea of voting out Brian, said maybe you should talk to Tom, see what he thinks because he was left out of the Jesse vote. And so she goes to Tom and proposes the same thing. And Tom already knows this plan. He already knows that, he's expecting Talia to come to her. So then he sends her to Justin, who is also expecting Talia to come to her or to come to him and propose this plan. So they just needed to convince Talia that it was her idea and let her lead the charge, quote unquote, in getting this vote out. Meanwhile, they needed her to not tell Nick, not tell Hunter. So she told Floyd she was voting for Hunter, that she knew that her and Nick were in trouble, so they just didn't trust Hunter, thought he had an idol. That was going to be the throwaway vote. She tells that to Nick. Later on, she feels like she can't trust Nick and so doesn't let him in on the plan to vote out Brian, which is smart. So Floyd thinks it's going to be a split on Nick and Talia. Hunter believes the same thing and is gunning for Talia because he heard his name come up from Talia, but Talia is roped in with Andy, Justin, and Tom to vote out Brian. This leaves Brian wondering what's going on because he feels something is wrong, but he's not sure what. And he wants to work with Nick. He feels though that Nick, Justin, and Talia are trying to do something because they've all been perceived on the bottom. And it's interesting that he doesn't play his idol. I asked him this in Spec Lounge today because if I personally saw that there were, for the 3rd time now, a plan to split the vote on Nick and Talia for fear of an idol, even though he knew that he had the idol, I would get suspicious of that. But his answer was intriguing because he said that the Nick Talia split was kind of spearheaded by him to target other people previously. So he didn't think anything of it. He just thought, oh, okay, I guess this time people actually want to do it and it'll go through. But he was nervous. He just didn't play his idol. For me, it is one of the best plays I've seen, I think, in a while. Very masterful, very, very well done too to prevent any type of tie. It was 4-2-1-1. So I mean, we see Arawak last season try to do the 4-2-1 split, and it was terrible. It burned the wrong people. But here, for Tom Andy, and Justin, it burned the right people.
That was a really good recap, Stephen. Thank you. I feel like I have an even better understanding now of how the vote went
Yeah.
down. So I
Should
appreciate
I
that.
should I should I like even be here? Like I
Yeah,
think you got it,
yeah,
dude.
yeah. I think it's just the
Like
Steven show now.
No,
Yeah.
no, no. I need you guys. I need you,
No, no,
please.
no. That was really well done. And you made some good points in there. I do think like we can get into this later. We do see some fallout from this vote though that is carried over. I think some like people who are hurt. Do we think it was the right decision for Talia not to bring Nick in here?
that
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. I would say just based on the way Nick was interacting with Brian, I think he had him I think they had each other at like number 2 on their trust rankings, and that alone should be enough to sort of spell that you should not tell Nick. Although, like, I don't know if she knew that, but she had to have known that if I leak this info to Nick, honestly, I might have if I were her, because I would say if we're trying to plan a Brian blindside, and if this doesn't work, it's either you or me. So like, just get on board. You know what I'm saying? Like, but obviously it worked out for her. It's just a matter of time to see if it will affect their relationship at all.
Yeah, the
I
only like my hesitation with it, Steven, is like that's her number one, and like they haven't been able to trust anyone else to this point because the vote's always been like basically been proposed as a split between the two of them. But I guess like it worked out. It's just a matter of like will he be able to like get over that?
I think part of it is, they were day one alliance, and I think they connected before any type of, excuse me, weird Nick shenanigans. And so she still feels a connection to him and still wants to work with him, but she is starting to realize some things about Nick that are a hindrance to her own game, which is very, very smart of her. Um, I think if I were in her position, I would not have told Nick. And Tom mentions this, and it's very, very smart of him. This vote, regardless of the outcome, if Brian plays the idol or not, is a win-win for Tom because either Brian goes home with the idol. They don't know for sure, but Tom is very, very high on believing that Brian had the idol. So you flesh out the idol, Brian goes home. Brian plays the idol, and then Nick goes home, which is someone that no one likes anyways. Um, so Tom is safe, Andy is safe, Justin is safe. They might have to deal with the fallout of targeting Brian if he was still in the game, the next round. But this vote was a very, very big win-win situation for Tom. Coming up with it, thinking the logistics through it. Andy was worried at one point that he might have made a comment to Floyd leaking the information about the vote. But ultimately, he kind of fixed it himself, and it it blew over and it was fine. Um, but I think Talia was very smart to not be reactionary. It's very easy to be reactionary and excited when you're on the bottom and people come to you and agree with, well, okay, they didn't even come to her. She went to them and they agreed with her plan, according to her. And so when you get that, you kind of get excited. You're like, yes, okay, I'm making moves. I hope I can trust these people. Um, should I bring in my alliance member or not? And I think a lot of times people make the mistake of talking to their alliance member about these extra plans that are happening, and then it blows up in their face. So for me, great move by Tom and great move by Talia.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Those two are kind of the players of that vote in particular. There was one player, actually two players that I wanted to mention. The first is Hunter. This vote out completely broke his trust in everyone except Floyd. He said he was going to go on his villain arc, and I'm excited to see it because Hunter is wildly entertaining to me. Um, but I could see why he be burned because Brian was both his number one and his shield, I believe. So that's like an incredibly useful ally, just gone with the wind, especially if they have an idol. If you at least, I don't think Brian told anybody, but given enough time, maybe he could tell Hunter, and that would build trust between them, build a rapport, and then you also know where one of the idols is. Um, so that's like an entire um, facet of Hunter's gameplay that's just sort of shut down. He can't do that anymore. He can only really rely on Floyd from his original tribe. And then the other player that I wanted to mention um, was Andy. Andy, I would say, sort of fumbled the bag this round, almost. Like Steven, like you said, there were a couple misplays this round, and Andy's paranoia got the better of him, and he told Floyd about the plan. But he was saved by his own wording, I guess, of telling him, because he was able to frame it later as like, "Oh no, actually, this was Talia's idea. Sorry, forgot to mention that part." Um, if For me personally, if he had said that and then like maybe like a while later he's like, "Oh no, this is actually someone else's idea. Don't pin this on me." That would raise a red flag. Um, but he told not only did he tell Floyd, but he also told Justin and Tom that he told Floyd because he got too paranoid. And honestly, like at least pre-swap, I think Andy was playing one of the best games of everybody on the tribe. So for him to sort of just let this paranoia get to him, um, I don't know if it's like a bad omen or maybe it's something he'll recover from, but it's definitely something that I caught and was, I'm not gonna say disappointed because, but like, you know, I think it was a bad move personally. To But we're all humans. We all make mistakes. So sometimes you just get paranoid. So I get it.
Exactly. And I think, you know, you worry when you're making a big move against a big player like this that someone might leak it or it's not going to happen or maybe they're so the paranoia is kind of justified, but it's how you handle and manage that paranoia that's key. And I wanted to ask, I guess, kind of let I'll ask this to Sarah because you've been following Guggenheim a little bit more. But with that explanation of Andy's kind of good gameplay mixed with his paranoia, do you think we're going to see something like that from DeLuca?
I could definitely see that. I think that especially when you she's had all this time to sort of like stew in her thoughts because they haven't gone to tribal. If the time comes for them to go to tribal, and she gets a whiff of something that isn't necessarily what she wants to hear, I could definitely see things going that way for her because we saw how extremely paranoid she got for the very first vote of the season when she heard her name thrown out. And even if it's not her name being thrown out, if it's one of her allies' names, I think she'll act similarly. So I could definitely see that happening. I don't think it's a huge deal what happened with Andy, but he was definitely one of the less visible players, I think, along with Floyd on Louvre to start, so I see why that could have like increased his like visibility at the very least, whether that's a good thing or not, or a bad thing or not, I should say.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that that's something that both Andy and DeLuca are going to have to manage is just how they deal with whatever threat level they have. Um, and Joe kind of mentioned this with Hunter. You know, Hunter really wanted the meat shield. He really wanted to keep Brian. He knew Brian was a, but he wanted to keep that meat shield. So I wonder if people would be inclined to keep DeLuca maybe a little bit longer because she is a big threat that you can easily hide behind. Um, so I know some people that were on Guggenheim were shocked to see Brian go. I think Danny in particular, one of them, because he knew of Brian previously. Um, so maybe that could set up some potential, like, oh, these people are playing, or what happened, you know. So that's the big thing. You have to manage your paranoia. I on my season was paranoid, getting into late merge all the time. Uh, and I gave away my idol too, which is always a bad move. But I gave away mine for free, and I got someone out for it that I wanted to get out, so it kind of worked out. But I ended up getting myself voted out because of my paranoia. So it's something you really need to rein it in. You need to sit back, look at all the pieces, think with a clear head, and try not to overreact and try not to, if you make a mistake, don't bring attention to it. That's it.
Exactly. I think it's best to like swiftly move on from that. I also just wanted to quickly touch on just like we've had some interesting pairs forming this season. We talked about the DeLuca and Chris pair, but I think on the other tribe on Louvre, the Floyd and Hunter pair has been so fun for me to watch because, like Joe alluded to, like Hunter has talked about going on a like a villain arc sort of trajectory here, but they're talking about Floyd in like the most like the highest praise ever whenever they talk about Floyd. And it just seems to be like a really sweet, wholesome relationship. So I love that. And like even when they get separated later on, Hunter's like, can someone tell Floyd that he looks good in his new profile picture? Like stuff like that. It's just so cute. So I love this like two sides of Hunter that's going on. And also the Hunter Tom dynamic I think is really interesting, especially after this vote. So any thoughts about those relationships in particular?
Well, I think I think this is actually a good segue into talking about the swap, um, because Hunter got swapped with the two people from his original Louvre tribe that he wanted to target, and now that he is, I mean, he went from basically being on the perceived bottom because he was left out of the vote along with Floyd, to now having five, right? Five Guggenheims to sort of be like, hey, these two, Andy and Tom, don't trust these guys. Like just signaling, like sending off so many like signals, being like, we need to get these guys out. Um, and it's sort of it's definitely something that the new Guggenheim has to sort of consider. But I'll take a step back from that for now and just um, since we're going into the swap here, I think it's just important to lay out who's on what tribe. So
Yes.
I think I think on New Guggenheim you've got five original Guggenheims or OGs, and in Amoya, Joey, Cody, Katie, Gabriel, and then the three Louvres in Hunter, Andy, and Tom. And then on the new Louvre, you've got um, Nick and Talia, and then Justin and Floyd from the OG Louvre, which is four, and then another four in Danny, DeLuca, Chris, and
Chase.
uh, Chase. Yes. So yeah, I think that well, there's definitely a lot of different dynamics going on, and I think I want to. I don't know. Which one do you guys want to talk about first?
Yeah, there's a lot to break down. Like the even split is really interesting to look at, but then just like the volatility on New Guggenheim is really interesting. So I'm happy to go wherever you guys want to start. Steven, what is your preference?
I'm going to make a bold prediction right now because
Oh,
I just made a kind of light bulb moment on my season when we had the swap. We swapped to four people from my original tribe with four people from the other tribe, and I believe five people and three people, with my original tribe being in the majority. And the way the season worked out, it was going to be a pagonging, and it wasn't. And two people on the minority tribe made it to final tribal council, and the one person left standing from my original tribe won. So I'm going to make a bold prediction here and say I think the winner of the season will be on Guggenheim, but I think that some of the Louvre members are going to make it farther than anyone expects. So I'm just going to throw that out there right now because I'm
All
seeing the
right.
parallels. I'm seeing the
How
connections.
how many auction dollars are you gonna bet on it?
Oh dear. I'm going to give up my immunity idol for it, honestly.
Oh my gosh. Not that. No. Wait,
I'm
so you were
seeing.
saying one of Hunter
That
and or
is
Tom
deep
is gonna
value
win?
right there.
Well, I don't know. No, not one of
Okay,
them, but
okay.
I think that they could make it far.
Okay.
Because the way that it worked out, our winner was on the tribe with my original tribe majority.
Got it.
I got stuck on the 4-4 tribe, and that was a nightmare. And thankfully, we planned ahead and were able to waste someone's vote so that the vote would have been 4-3 anyways. That's a whole other thing. But a 4-4 split. I want to talk about that first because I think that one is it. There's so much potential for a mess.
Yeah, go for it.
Um,
Yeah.
we have two pairs that are together in Talia and Nick and Chris and DeLuca, and both of them are volatile in their own ways, which is amazing. And then you get Chase, who doesn't like Chris at all, and you have Danny, who is kind of closer to. He's very close with Chase. I don't know if he considers Chase his number one or not, but they could be easily seen as a pair. And then you have Floyd and Justin, who have worked together in the past, and so there's lots of little pairs. It's very possible that this tribe has some weird vote configuration that is either a 4-4 split or some stupid thing like a 3-2-1-2 something or another. Um, so I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your guys' thoughts on how that tribe is going to handle things?
Um, okay, I'm not gonna make a prediction like you did, but I do have a bit of a hot take regarding this tribe. The person on this tribe that is in the best position right now, in my humble, holier than thou opinion, is Talia. Um, because you have people like Floyd and Justin who want to target Nick. Floyd still wants to target Nick for his outburst at Conrad. Um, and Floyd and Justin of the four quote unquote pairs, they're more of a duo by association. They're sort of the weakest pair. Um, and then Chris and DeLuca versus Chase and Danny. The four of them do not trust. It's like a 2v2. They do not trust each other. Um, which sort of leaves Talia, right? Everyone else is sort of preoccupied with targeting someone else. She's like the only person, and I sort of see this in a lot of people's confessionals on that tribe, is that her name has not come up at all, which is, I mean, I don't know if she realizes it, but that's got to be at least a liberating feeling because your name was on the block for three tribal councils straight, and now you're finally in the clear. Um, and additionally, Chase and Floyd have been talking to each other. They've been sort of like eyeing each other's like the thorns in their sides. That being Chris for Chase and Nick for Floyd. So there could definitely be a lot of potential um, to make some magic happen. Um, and also, this is the only tribe at the moment with an idol. So any plans as we know, DeLuca is the one with the idol, so that sort of gives her the upper hand. But any plans would have to be made with even more care, in my opinion, than the Brian vote out. I think that there would have to be a lot of layers to work around, and all these people, they have a lot of time. They won the challenge, the first post swap immunity challenge, so they have time to build bonds and then test them. So it's gonna be like disarming a bomb, basically. They're gonna have whoever the target is, it's gonna be um sort of a I'm not gonna say all out brawl, but like a lot of like sneakiness going on, I think. And it's gonna be wildly entertaining. I hope this tribe goes to tribal because it would be so entertaining.
Yeah, there are so many dynamics to consider here. And I do like your take, Joe, about Talia being in the best position. But then I wonder, like, would she make an easy consensus vote as well if, like, the right pairs start agreeing to work together and they need someone to vote out? And it's like, no, you can't vote out this person or this person. So, like, they just agree to compromise on her. That's my only fear for her. But I do think she's in a good spot. And if she can lay low and, like, build some trust, like, cross tribal lines here, she could do really well. And I'm a Talia fan. She's been so much fun to watch so far. And I hope she can
Yeah.
stick around a lot longer. So, what do you think about the dynamics, Steven, in terms of like who could be targeted here, who's in a power position, etc.?
I agree with Joe on Talia. I think she it depends on how she plays it, but she is very well insulated at the moment. Her only flaw is being tied to Nick because Nick has been spread around once again as being this thorn in people's sides. And so that would be her only undoing. But she mentioned that DeLuca really likes her. And if DeLuca likes you, DeLuca keeps you. She's kind of like a mob boss almost in that regard. And so I think DeLuca still has a lot of power. Um, just by mercy of her own social game. We see her conversation with Danny, and I think Danny is really warming up to her. Chase doesn't hate DeLuca. I think if anything, he just dislikes that she is tied to Chris because he doesn't like Chris. Um, and I want to see how DeLuca handles Justin and Floyd. I think that DeLuca could do really well in managing a vote if she doesn't get paranoid, like we've talked about. And I think Talia is in a very good spot. I think the people that are in trouble are definitely Nick. I think Chris is, and I want to say Justin or Floyd too, just because like Joe made a really good point saying that they are the least tight bond in that tribe, and so Uh, the vote could go anywhere. And I think if it comes down to it, DeLuca's playing the idol for herself and not Chris.
Oh yeah, that could be really interesting. And you know what? I think Floyd we haven't talked about too much, but he is a pretty notable like social player. We saw it on the original edition of Louvre, and we see I think it was Danny who said in his confessional like, "Wow, Floyd really gets around with the talking to people." So I would honestly love to see like a DeLuca versus Floyd, like who's the better social player, power struggle here. I don't know if that's exactly how it would work out, but that would be something that's fun to see. Would be fun to see because I think they're like respectively the best social players on their original tribes. I would say, um, so that could be interesting. But anything else here on the new Louvre before we go over to the new Goog?
If those two, DeLuca and Floyd, decide to hook up with their combined social powers, they will run the game. That's all I'm going to say there.
I would love to see it.
Y'all just gotta hold tight in the power of deep value. I'm telling you, people.
I
The
Deep
hate
value
stocks are
TM.
that.
Yeah.
the stocks are about to rise. It's gonna happen any second now. I'm telling you.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
that would have been an episode title had it not been that they never went to tribal. If they went to
Right.
tribal, easily that's going to be an episode
All
title.
caps. Yeah. Uh huh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so over on
I'm
the new
obsessed with that.
Guggenheim, yeah, we talked about we have this 3-5 split. So, Steven, what are you making of these initial dynamics over here? Is it gonna be tribal lines? What do you see happening?
I think Gabriel wants to shake up the game. He is stuck with a couple people that he doesn't like very much. Um, Cody, I don't think he's vibed well with. I don't think he is particular about Joey. Um, but he has Amoya and Katie, who are two people that he's been working closely with. I think the only struggle is that both Amoya and Katie are kind of caught up with their lives, which valid, that's totally fair. So he doesn't have a good base on players that are playing actively. But I see in his chats how people don't want to talk about the vote, or they're too busy to talk about the vote, or stuff's not happening and it's weird. And I think he wants to make a move, and I think he's willing to rope in Tom. He likes Tom and he likes Andy, and I think of the three that are on the bottom, he might go for Hunter, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's so it's bad enough for Andy and Tom that they got swapped into a minority, but also the only other person from their tribe is actively trying to get them out. Um, so that signals to the five Guggenheims that, like, oh yeah, we could just take out, we could just pagong them and that'll be that. Um, but if Gabriel um sort of wanted to make a move, it would just be a matter of how long do I have this window of opportunity available to do this? Um, and that's for him to decide, really. He's gotta, if he wants to make a move, he's gonna have to talk with um Katie and Amoya first off. Um, but yeah, it's the tribal dynamics. It's interesting because uh, like I said with my Talia opinion, I think the person that is in the best position on this new Guggenheim is probably Katie. Um, she was the swing vote on the pre-swap Guggenheim, um, and she got swapped into um, a duo of Joey and Cody, a duo of Gabriel and Amoya, Andy and Tom, and then Hunter, who's sort of like a lone wolf. Um, Hypothetically speaking, she could probably make any move that she wanted to right now. She could probably gather the numbers, um, but I think that would rock the boat too much. I think it's just a matter of information and timing, as Nick Wilson once said. Um, but yeah,
I wonder if Katie realizes that she's in that power position, and if she is going to use that to her advantage, because I think of all the people on old Guggenheim, she was in the middle, and I don't think she had any enemies or anyone that she particularly disliked or distrusted that much. Um, Mainly, a lot of her trust, I think, was through association with other people. So she is in a very, very good position here. I wonder, Hunter could be in a good position, but I think what Gabriel needs to do is get Amoya and Katie, and then get the two free votes that he has available in Tom and Andy, who are in self preservation mode, and bring them in to maybe take out Cody. I know he said that they would vote Joey, but he wanted to take out Cody had old Guggenheim gone to tribal council. And so I think if Gabriel can do that, he's gonna set himself up really, really well. This tribe is really interesting because it has a lot more of these subtle players. I think um, New Louvre has a lot of the very loud, aggressive players, and this tribe has a lot of the very subtle, under the table players. And someone is going to have to make a move, and someone's going to have to come to the forefront and own up to it. And I think Gabriel is going to do that.
I
I'd
will,
be
yeah,
in.
go ahead,
Oh,
Joe.
I was just gonna say I would like to see him pull it off. Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah. I would like to see him pull it off. I don't want him to put himself out there this soon, I think. But go ahead, Joe. Yeah, if you have anything else to add.
oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I would like to see him pull it off just from a spectator because bloodshed. We love bloodshed, but like, I don't think it's the smartest move for his game. I know he said he wanted to make Jerry because that's what we all want. Um, so he might just like clam up. It really depends on what he values as a player. Um, so yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Gabriel.
Yeah, Gabriel had a really good VidCon that he gave, but it was a little bit outdated by the time we saw it. But I just like Gabriel gives really good confessionals in general. I think he's a very level-headed player. And he's a good social player. Like nobody ever had anything negative to say about him on the original Guggenheim, and he was positioned well as a result of it. Not as good as Katie. Katie was definitely in the swing position, like you guys both said, and I think she continues to be in a good spot here. I think the thing that will prevent him from targeting Cody here is Katie, because Katie still feels best about Cody, she said. I think she said she feels best about, let me just go back and check her con actually before I forget. She definitely feels good about Cody. I think Cody still feels good about her, so I don't think there's a reason for her to burn that bridge yet. And if Gabriel ends up doing that, it could burn the Katie bridge, which is I don't think something he wants to do. Um but yeah, Katie says she feels best about Gabriel and Cody. Yeah. So the reason to do it was to become Katie's number one, but I think you would have to pretend to be blindsided for it to be effective because I think Katie would be burned by that. I think Amoya and Katie are both like slower burning players, like you guys said, who are maybe more conservative. I think the first thing Amoya said after the swap was like, "Okay, great. We just have to be tribe strong here." And so I think that's her preferred way to go about things. So I don't know if Gabriel will want to make a move here necessarily to target one of his original tribe members.
Would it be better if he targeted Joey? Do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, because on the old Guggenheim, the consensus vote was going to be between Joey and DeLuca for that counter alliance, specifically for the reason
Mm.
because they knew about the Triple K alliance, and so they didn't want Katie to feel like she had to target someone within that three. So they were kind of tiptoeing around that. So yes, I do think Joey would be the preferred target over Cody if that were the case.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
hopefully Gabriel wises up to that.
Can I just say we have had so many good confessionalists this season so far. Um, Gabriel, DeLuca, Tom, um, even like more. Sometimes with people like Talia, like less is more. You know, she's just a constant like one-liner machine. Um, Andy's also been pretty good at like filling people in. Cody and Chris have both been really good at filling in the specs on sort of their POV. Chase as well. I forgot about Chase. There's just so many like I don't know. This has been a blast to spectate. This is the first org that I've spectated right after the first one that I played too. So it's like an entirely different experience. I'm just laughing, just shit posting it up in Spec Lounge. It's a blast.
It's always fun to spectate, and I feel the same. Ooh, we have a lot of really good narrators. We have a lot of really good people that are breaking down their games, despite how chaotic it is. If you can follow it along, they do a good job of explaining things. Um, and I think it's always good to be able to spectate after you play, because if you spectate before you play, you kind of get into your head a little bit about, oh, this is what happened last season, and I don't want that to happen to me. So I'm going to pre-plan and prepare for things. Um, and then it doesn't work out. I'll say the same thing about when I spectated season 22. That was a blast to watch, especially after playing my season. So this has been a really, really good cast. I want to bring up, I think, something on um, this new tribe of Guggenheim that I think really hurt them in how an auction item got played, and they all messed up. So in the last two rounds, we've had two auction items. Well, I guess now we have three that we haven't talked about. And I'll briefly go over them. I think two could come into play this vote. So the one that I don't think is going to come into play, Chase purchased it. It is the Rosetta Stone, and it allows you to basically force someone to only talk in GIFs or emojis for 12 hours. And that includes everything from tribe chat to DMs to anything. So that'll be interesting to see who he plays it on, or if he plays it on someone. But the two advantages that I think will come into play here are the Ithaca clock. Well, they are in play, but the other one is the bingo machine. So the Ithaca clock allowed Chris, who purchased it, to pick a previous season's twist and implement it. And he picked the amusement parks with all the rides, all the chaos that comes from rides, and the cross tribal communication that comes from that. Doesn't include DMs. It only includes the tribe chat or the ride chat, excuse me, with opportunities to win extra money. And the bingo machine allows for one player's vote to be randomized at tribal council. And Andy is currently in possession of that and thinking about using it. So before we discuss how things are going to play out with those two twists, I want to ask you guys, of the available twists that were mentioned, which ones would you pick in this situation to implement? Like the previous season twist. Sorry.
Camp PatORG, because it was the best season. That is all I have to say.
No bias
No.
at all.
Definitely not amusement parks. This twist is chaotic and I have PTSD.
I actually have not seen all the options, but like I will say, um, I think that this was actually no. If I had known that there was a swap coming, I probably would have actually used Camp PatORG because that allows you to sort of um, talk with your allies that you got swapped away from at sort of a last second thing, and maybe make a plan, sort of snake your way through it. Um, I think honestly, it'd be interesting to see how a swap would go down if it were immediately followed by an open campfire. Um, just to see, I don't know. I feel like Hunter would just immediately just DM all of Guggenheim and be like, "Vote these people out, please." Um, just as like an interesting scenario that could have potentially happened. Um, Chase and Gabriel definitely would have had like a somber farewell. um, I don't know. Obviously we can only speak in hypotheticals, but I think it would have been interesting personally.
Yeah, I think I
I
would have gone for Camp PatORG also. I just want to quickly
mhm.
say, like, it wouldn't have been advantageous for Chris to pick the back to basics because he knows where the idol is and, he doesn't want to hurt his ally by making her not be able to play her idol. Exile doesn't seem that advantageous because it only involves two people. The spy is like, there's so much up in the air for social media. So I do think it probably is between amusement parks and Camp PatORG, and I kind of understand why he chose amusement parks, but I think I probably would have done the campfire twist. What about you, Steven?
I have to say this is exactly why I am a hoe, because Joe is right. Hoes for Joes rise up. This is exactly what you do. Chris did not have the foresight to think of a swap coming, and that was his detriment because you immediately do Camp PatOrg 100%. It doesn't matter if maybe you misjudge when the swap is going to be and you play it early, but in that case, you just make connections with the other people that maybe you're going to swap with. So Camp PatOrg is the perfect one. I understand the rides because he says, "Oh, there's cross tribal communication, and I can get some extra money." Okay, that sounds good too. But everyone was confused about the cross tribal communication rules with that one, um, and ultimately we have all of Louvre going to one ride except for Nick. And so it's a complete waste. It's a complete waste of trying, and I don't think it was planned that way, but it's just a complete waste of trying to get connections and get information from other people. So yes, Joe is correct. Sarah is correct. 100% you do Camp PatOrg.
Season 23 stays winning. I love my
And we love you.
fans.
Yeah, I felt for poor Chris because he was like very stressed out in making this decision. I feel like, and I don't think like the amusement park one like it's hurting in him and all. Like it's fine. It probably just wasn't the best choice overall. I think Camp PatORG would have been better for him, but it would have been better for other people too. So I understand why he did this. He saw like the advantage in potentially winning more money as well, but I mean, whatever. It's like fine. I don't think it's gonna have a super tremendous like impact on things, but yeah.
I think it could have. I really think it could have if the right people went to the right rides. And it's funny because Chris even mentioned, I think, to Cody about this advantage, and they didn't end up on the same ride. So it's a waste. I think if we saw, maybe Talia and Tom meet up on the same ride by themselves, it could have been really good. But what we get is two people by themselves, a group of three where it's, I believe, Andy, Tom, and no, it's Gabriel. Hold on, let me check. I got to get this right. I'm going to mess it up. Andy, Gabriel, and Nick. So you get that configuration. Cody's by himself. Amoy is by himself. Hunter and Katie are together, but they're on the same tribe at the moment. So nothing interesting there. And then the log ride currently is just DeLuca sharing baby pictures and a
Yeah.
whole bunch of food and pet pics.
No, it's
So
so funny. Yeah. No
it's
carousel
it's
alliance. What a
also
flop.
like it's so hilarious that it was completely accidental too.
Yeah,
if it
the
were
Like
log ride's
planned, it'd be
nobody
common.
good, but
Yeah.
planned for it.
There was definitely potential, but yeah, I don't see it. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about like the actual immunity results and what we think might happen here? Not just like hypotheticals, I guess, anymore. Well, I guess still hypothetical, but what do we think about how things are going to shape up on Guggenheim now that they have to go to tribal?
Um, yeah, so I think that Andy was the one who screwed up their I guess their part of the part of the puzzle, excuse me. And I didn't really realize this until after the fact, but I think he's the one that's been sort of like lagging in the challenges, and I guess that's why OG Louvre has been going to tribal so often. Maybe not directly because of him, but I guess it certainly didn't help matters. And I don't think it bodes well for him. I don't think it bodes well for anybody under any circumstance. But he's gonna have to like bank on having a hell of a social game if he wants to uh, get through this round, even because people sort of, I think, Gabriel is taking a liking to Tom. I think a lot of people generally are taking more of a liking to Tom than Andy. And this challenge certainly did not help him in that aspect.
it's very easy to point the blame on the person responsible for you going to tribal council. Um, so I agree. I think Andy's in the toughest spot. It's it's interesting that you bring up how he's kind of slacked previously, and it's almost like this was his moment to rise to the occasion. Where on the other tribe, Talia mentions how every time she's tried to be active in the challenges, they've lost, and when she sits out, they win. So there's some weird karma combo, or I don't know, something weird happening between those two and their relationship with challenges. But Andy, it's weird because Cody was very, very gung ho on voting Andy out because of the results, because it was an honest mistake. And as someone with behind the scenes access, I will say I was curious to see how it happened because he edited those messages where they were listing out the answers a couple times, mostly to change one answer to get it correct. And so I wanted to see if at any point he accidentally changed the answer to the incorrect one. And what I saw was weird. There was a deleted message from Tom that said number 12 is M19 question mark. It was gone, deleted. Um, I don't know why he deleted it. Um, because that message was made before they submitted their I think it was before they no, actually it might have been after they submitted it, so there's nothing you could do about it, but he caught it, um, and then deleted it. So it's just that's a weird thing that I noticed. um, but it's really sad that Cody is so gung-ho on it, and he wants to see if the time was a factor. And just by looking at the timestamps, they still would have lost. Um, so you can't blame Andy totally for this. Um, but I think that it's going to go his way. And I kind of hope he plays the bingo machine, if anything, just to shake things up. Um, but I'm not sure if he's going to wait until if he has a more of a power position to play it. I don't know. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. He's in a tough spot here. I do hope he plays it as well, just to like mix things up a little bit. But I was just looking through, we really haven't gotten anything from them in confessionals about the vote yet. So I imagine things are happening in DMs or they're preoccupied with the rides as well. So I'm interested to see if there are any other thoughts going on there. Personally, I'm happy that Hunter's name hasn't necessarily come up that much yet. Because I'm a big Hunter stan, but and I do think Tom has put in a significant amount of work socially on this new tribe, and it's been noted by the Googs. So I think they do feel generally pretty good about him. So yeah, I do think Andy just might end up getting unlucky here, and it just could be like a situation where he's swap screwed. I don't know. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, you summed it up pretty well. Um, it really just depends on uh, what Guggenheim wants out of like I think Amoya said that she wants to keep the tribe strong for challenges, and if that's the case, then Andy's an easy person to pin the blame on. That is interesting what you said about Tom though, deleting the message. Maybe he's playing some 5D chess that we're not aware about, but I doubt it. um, just looking at them right now, I'm sort of scrolling through the confessionals like you are, and we're not really seeing a whole lot of um, vote talk, at least not from the people on the perceived top. Andy's sort of
There,
going in. What was that?
I'll say there's one interesting comment I just noticed from Amoya. She doesn't want to vote Tom out. And this is the most I think we've gotten strategically out of Amoya in a while. She's been relatively quiet. Um, but she says that Tom is kind of trying to protect Andy, but Andy doesn't seem like he's worried about being voted out. That's what she says.
Oh
Uh,
yes, I see that.
and then she goes, Hunter, is this why you were on the bottom? You were MIA during the most important part of the game because he wasn't there for the challenge. But she thinks that Andy might have an idol because he's not worried about going home. And so that's why Amoya would consider targeting Andy. So just another little, I guess, layer
Mm-hmm.
there and another nail in Andy's coffin, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely curious to hear from the other Guggenheim members, specifically like a Gabriel and Katie, maybe, just to get an idea of where their heads are at. But yeah, it does seem like it's probably one of the Louvre members going here, sadly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I need to get caught up because people are kind of posting some stuff now, but it seems that Tom is setting himself up well. Amoya and Gabriel have been talking to everybody, but I don't think it's enough to put a target on his back. Andy says, I'm literally stealing the same pitch Talia sent to me for the Brian vote, and I'm going to use it.
I love that. The
uh,
shameless stealing.
oh,
Efficiencies.
Yeah,
he says, tomorrow we make our apologies, tonight we make our move. Wow.
shit, I'd buy it.
That's a that's episode title material right there if I've
It
ever heard it.
is. Yeah.
Oh, isn't that the Tom Westman quote?
Is it?
Wait, is
Yeah,
it?
that's
Oh.
yeah, he's quoting Tom Westman.
Oh shit. Okay.
Dang. Be original, Andy.
Yeah, Andy,
Darn
stop stealing everyone's shit.
it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, and he's
Man,
done
Joe
like some
comes with your own
breakdowns here.
original cool quotes.
Yeah, right? Come on. All right. Well, anything else you guys want to touch on? We've covered a lot of ground here and definitely set up some interesting things to come. So, Joe, do you have any ideas or thoughts about what future auction items could be?
um, so yes, I DM'd Pat with the idea, and then he was like, "We have that already." So I'm not gonna say what it is.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
but
You need to
I guess
DM
I
me. I want to know which one you guessed.
okay. I'll send it to you after the
Interesting.
podcast is over. But yeah, I do know at least what one of the ideas or one of the auction items is. I don't know what like the painting or the artifact behind it is going to be, but
Yeah.
I think I have an idea of what's to come. And it is kind of a doozy because I thought of it. So it must be a doozy.
Okay.
But
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to let
So
us know in Spec Lounge when it comes up. I want to know which one you thought of.
yeah. All right,
Okay.
I will do that.
Nice. Okay, Steven, any closing thoughts here?
I want to ask because we've been trying to be careful with how we present the auction items to not give away too much, but to give away just enough that if you're savvy enough, you will pick up on what is being presented. So I want to ask you guys, looking at the auction items, looking at the wording behind the descriptions, do you think you would have guessed any of the twists that have come out so far? Or do you
I
think I'm
haven't
doing too good of a job?
I haven't guessed any of them right so far.
I haven't either. The only I was kind of surprised. It seemed like a lot of people were bidding a lot of money on the bingo machine. I think it was in particular. And to me, that item sounded like so chaotic and like chance driven. I was really surprised that people seemed to want that one. But I haven't guessed anything correctly, no.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I guessed right was the $100 idol clue. Um, but other than that, that one was a pretty easy one to sort of peel the layers back on, I guess. But other than that, no. All of them are very cryptic. You're doing a great job. We love you very much.
You're doing
Thank
great,
you,
sweetie.
Joe.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
doing
we just
amazing, sweetie.
thank you, thank you. Please shower me with more praise. Um, no, we're trying to because it's one thing if you know what the item is outright and then you just throw all your money at it right away, kind of like how we saw with the first auction item being the hidden immunity idol for the first round. Um, but it makes it a little bit more fun if you try to guess and read into what is being said. Because, like you said, Sarah, I was trying to kind of hint at the bingo machine being something that had to do with randomness and
Yeah,
luck
I
of the
I picked
draw.
up on that, and so I was like, I wouldn't touch
Mhm.
that one. So I didn't know why people seemed so enthusiastic about bidding on that.
And it is a good item because it's one
It
that
is,
doesn't
yeah.
affect you, it affects someone else.
Mm-hmm.
However, the vote could be randomized onto yourself. Part of the
True.
caveat is it will not vote for someone that is immune, and it will not vote. It will not cast a self vote.
Right.
So that's the only caveat. Um, but yeah, like I said, we're trying to find items, whether they be historical or art or some kind of inspiration that relates to the um, because if you think about like the mutiny advantage, we went with the assassination of Caesar. I very heavily mentioned backstabbing people close to you or being backstabbed yourself. Um, and that's kind of what a mutiny does. And I think there were quite a few people that paid pretty highly for that one as well. And so we want to keep some mystery around what the items are, but there are going to be subtle clues as to what they are in the future. So keep an eye out. Keep the guesses coming because I love to see what people think the items are. Um, and hopefully, I can keep writing them cryptically enough to keep you guys fooled.
There is the advantage that allows one player to steal another's credit card information.
Yes, that's an important one that I can't believe you spoiled it already.
Ah,
Um,
I'm so sorry.
I
Oh my
was going to
god.
play it against you, but now you know about it.
Ah,
So
well, now I gotta blindside you.
dang it. Dang it. Not, no,
Not
I'm a
again.
hoe for Joe. I'm a hoe for Joe.
Oh my god. Um, Joe, any closing thoughts of just your thoughts on the season overall, the spectating versus playing experience? Who are you enjoying? Anything you want to leave the listeners off with here?
Oh man, I've been enjoying watching this so much. I was talking with Clara, the winner of my season, yesterday about how it's so chaotic and everyone is completely off the rocker, and it's just such a blast to watch. And I'm glad that um first off, I'm glad that a lot of uh my fellow players from my season have stuck around to watch, because it's, offered me ample opportunity to continue being friends with them, because I think my cast was full of, as I like to say, kings, queens, and royalties in betweens. Um, but and it's sort of like, provided me a chance to talk to them more, and I'm glad that we have this sort of continuation of our stories together. And it's been great watching, and I'm so excited to see where this season goes. I'm so excited to see someone get their credit card information stolen. Um, I'm already considering voting Talia for funniest and player of the season. Um, but yeah, it's just been a blast, and it's also been quite the honor to come on the podcast and armchair quarterback this whole thing with you guys.
Well, it's been great having you both. Thank you, Joe, for joining us for the first time, and Stephen for the second time here. Thank you to Stephen for providing us with these exceptional recaps. Like you said, Joe, it's just really fun to have like the PatORG community grow each season with new people joining who played, and the fact that so many of you guys have stuck around as well, and we have our people we love from season 22 and we have season 21 with Steven and everyone, so it's really great just to be able to enjoy this all together after going through the trauma of playing in org. So
Trauma is an understatement.
it really is. It really is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, thank you guys so much for helping me catch up on everything here for these past few rounds. We got the first vote of the swap coming up, so I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about soon. But for Joe and Steven, I'm Sarah. Thank you for joining us on the Art of the Spiel, and we'll see you next time.
See you, everybody.